today I'm joined by John, a former member of the Defence Forces and an operations manager. Kind of finished up at the moment.
Yeah.
With a stay-at-home parent, enjoying life.
Yes, it's probably the most difficult one so far. So yeah, it's been different. Let's just say.
Yeah. How long are you out of the army now?
Left in December 2012, so
Okay.
we're at 10, 11 years at this point.
Grant, do you miss it now, or?
Part of it, I missed.
Okay.
I suppose missed the people, the good parts, but being in contact with the people who are still in. It's not the army I left, so I've no kind of main kind of like urge to go back or anything at this point.
Yeah. You went in as an officer, right?
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
finished as a commandant. Why did you decide to join the army in the first place?
Well, I was very young going in. I literally I joined in 1990, so I did my leaving cert in 1990. And funnily enough, actually, my mother was a civil servant in the Department of Defence.
Okay.
And she said, "I'd say being an army officer is a job that might suit you." So that's about as much thought as I put into it, and did the application form, which even back then was pretty kind of, I suppose, intensive. And that did the interviews, got the cadets then. The 67 cadet class, so we trained from 1990 to 1992.
Okay.
Commissioned in 92 then as a second lieutenant.
Right, so 2 years in the Corps, yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, 18 months.
18 months,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It's still long enough, right? I
Yeah,
was going to say
it's
not
long
too
enough.
bad, but it is
Yeah,
long.
no, but I mean, it goes quickly because it's basically,
Yeah.
I mean, in those days, the idea was, it's like, it's your recruit, NTOs, and then officers, so it's, 3-6 months courses put together, back to back. And then the idea being that you've, some idea of what you're going to be facing when you go out then into the army.
Yeah. Did you play sports or anything like before you joined?
I played
or?
GAA.
Yeah. But it wouldn't have been at like a senior
No,
level,
I
right?
wasn't like inter-county or anything there was a lot, like, actually Jim Gavin, the Dublin
Yeah,
manager,
yeah.
he was my cadet class.
Oh, was
And we
he?
had a few I think we had a few Cork footballers as well, and a few rugby players. Yeah.
Been trying to get Jim, can't get through to him.
I don't have his
He's
number,
evasive.
sorry.
It's alright.
Yeah, he's very busy.
Yeah, I know, he's a busy man, so it's no problem. But you're in, so what age when you went in? Did you have like college degree behind you, or did you go
No,
into school
literally
leaver?
straight, I was 17.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So pretty young, right?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, probably too young. I mean, it's like I literally, the first time I'd ever stayed away from home for any period of time was when I went down to the cadet school on 11th of November 1990. So, I mean, had my 18th birthday there.
Right, yeah.
And I mean, of course, the flip side is when you come out the far end, then you're younger.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had 22 years done, and like I was a pensioner at 39.
Yeah.
So there's that side to it as well. But I mean, there's a lot to be said with, I suppose, the complexities and the level of responsibilities you have. That's a lot to put on a kid.
Yeah.
And that's why the training has to be as difficult as it is. And I mean, I can see why, and I can also see why sometimes it doesn't suit some people. And the problem is, well, like with any job, but particularly the army, you don't know whether it's for you till you're in the middle of it. And then it's a rude awakening.
What do you think about the age? Like, do you think the age should be higher? Like, cause I think they moved up to 18 now. I don't think you can join anymore at 17.
You can with your
Parental consent.
But I mean, no. I mean, there's, the downsides, as I said, are probably wiped out by the upsides of going in young.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're moldable.
Yeah.
When you come in, probably without too many worldviews that might be conducive to being in the army, and you're open to be trained. But I mean, I can't say you need to be young because you need to be fit for the start. I think Regis on the news they've upped the upper age limit to 26, 27 now. I'm not sure if it's the same for the cadets.
I think it's like 29 for general enlistment.
Oh,
now.
is it? Yeah. I mean, you can see that as well because you'd have people then who have good life experience who would probably be, I suppose, physically and morally tougher maybe.
Yeah.
But the opposite side to that as well, then, they might be too set in their ways because the army is what the army is, and there's no, at the end of the day, you're there to follow orders. Not blindly, but to a certain extent, you do what you're there to do what you're told.
What do you think about Lauren, the join age, like the 16? Do you think that's too young then?
Too young.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever about the apprenticeship's cool because the majority of that is academic. But it's kind of like, I think they only do the military stuff at the holidays from the studying. But no, 17 absolute minimum.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Man, so you're in training now for you joined in 90 and you made it through the 18 months.
Yeah.
How did you find the whole 18 months in general, like as a kind of young 17?
I I mean, literally the hardest bit for me at the start was being away from home, because I'd never been away from home. And when we were there, I think you did the minimum of 10 weeks before you got a den, and it was only a day pass. It wasn't a stay-at-home pass.
Right.
So that was the most difficult thing. But you know, it's a cliche, but it's true. It's this idea of everybody's in it together.
Yeah.
You know, and
definitely.
and it's everything is so new, and I mean, there's also an element that it's cool.
Yeah.
You know, every boy thinks he wants to be a soldier.
Yeah.
And the training is set out in such a way that there's always objectives.
Yeah.
So you can always see, and I mean, I suppose the advice I give anybody in any type of training is, don't be looking at the end. Just look at the next objective. Now, don't be thinking, like, there's no point in going in on day one and saying, like, how am I going to make it to the end of 18 months? Like, what you're doing is, like, I have a test next week, or you know, an exercise next week. Just short steps and do it that way. And then what happens is you don't notice the you know, the time moving on in general. Then
no, it's fair enough. And so once you done the training, then where were you based? Then were you based?
Well, 2nd Battalion. Then after that, in the Brewer, and then because I was an officer then at that stage, we all went to college.
Okay. Yeah.
So I
4 years in Galway, was it?
Yeah, 4 years. So I was commissioned in '92, and then started college in '94.
Okay.
And so I was 2nd Battalion up until college, and while I was in college, I finished college in '98. I did a Bachelor of Business Studies.
Okay.
And then when I finished in '98, that's when I had my first trip overseas as platoon commander. So in charge of 30 people in the Lebanon. Yeah. That's when UNIFIL was on all the time.
See, when you're in college in Galway, right?
Yeah.
And the army obviously paid for you to go to college. Did you feel like there was more pressure on you then to perform, or?
Not really. And I mean, the thing about it is as well, like, I mean, it was like the kind of shoe was on the other foot, in the sense that, you know, I was in first year. Yeah. I was 22.
Yeah.
To like 3 years of army under my belt. I was already working. Like, I mean, it wasn't my first time away from school, and the kind of concept of, and particularly of not panicking, and you know, you can be really, I suppose, cynical, and I suppose, you know, operationally minded, in the sense, right, hang on, I have to do X amount of exams over this amount of period. Like, this exam is worth a certain percentage of the overall mark, and you just plan accordingly, and you don't get carried away with the whole thing. Okay. I mean, there is additional, I suppose, responsibility of you representing the army, because you're in uniform in college for a start, and you live on the base it's not actually in the barracks. They have their own building next door to the barracks in Galway, so you're there, you're representing the army, so that is important, and you know, you don't want to be, and also, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure if you failed, you'd be explaining yourself to somebody, because the army was saying, rightly so, listen, you're being fed and watered and paid. All you have to do is turn up and do your homework. So if you can't do that, you're going to be explaining yourself, and that's fair enough. So I mean, it was a good time, and unless you were, you know, unlucky, and the only time we went back to the army was the summer holidays. Yeah. And then, of course, I mean, you're only back for whatever 2 or 3 months, and everybody knew at that stage, because UNIFIL was that you were going overseas. Like, you know, the way college normally finishes in June. Yeah. You were going to be on the next winter trip. Okay. So that was always what the case was going to be. Right. So
so you got the degree then. Yeah. Done and dusted, and then straight on the plane then to Lebanon.
I mean, I was actually in the Lebanon for the graduation. Okay. So I never
didn't get to graduate.
They sent it to me. I have it at home somewhere, but So I was on the 84th Battalion UNIFIL, which went out in October '98. Yeah. And that was my first trip, and then came back to the 2nd Battalion. And
you're a platoon commander in Lebanon, right? Yeah. And then were you anywhere specific in Lebanon? Like, were you on the outpost?
We were. I was A Company. That's where the Eastern Brigade are. So there's 3 posts. There was Alia Tum, which is the company headquarters. There was Tibnin Bridge, the infamous place, and then a place called the Black Hole, which is the most forward OP in Lebanon at the time, where you're basically, you could see into the Israeli. So the 2 months in Tibnin Bridge on the checkpoint on the road, 2 months in the Black Hole and an OP, and then the final 2 months, but basically in the camp, just doing, like, you know, guards and normal kind of admin. Yeah.
How did you find it going over, like, as a young officer? Did you feel like you were prepared?
I was prepared, but I mean, it didn't, you know, there's no, like, I mean, I'd say of the 31 of us, I'd say 28 of them were older than me. Yeah, okay. You know, like, and there was guys literally who I was in charge of who had been in the army longer than I was alive. Yeah. And the thing about it is, like, you know, and that's the nature of the army, and that's why the training is so important. But at the end of the day, you know, the first thing I say, and it's like this in any job, you know, if you go in thinking you know more than everybody else, you're finished from the word go. I mean, you have to take advice from people who've been, like, people on multiple trips. There was a guy there with 16 trips when I was on my first.
Right, okay.
But at the same time, you're the officer, you're the guy in charge, so I mean, you make the decision. But you'd be a very foolish person to go in and think you know it all, because you're like, I've just learned it recently in the cadet school, because, you know, it doesn't translate into reality. But no, and the thing about it is, you know, as we've seen sadly there last year, like, the Lebanon is a dangerous place.
Yeah.
You know, we're just like, we've been lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, we've lost too many people. Like, one's too many, but I mean, there was any amount of times and any amount of trips that, like, if somebody had gone left instead of right, there would have been another dead body. So there is always that level of stress. And then I suppose you factor in the fact as well, then, you know, there are people, everybody has their own lives, and, you know, the way they've got their own things going on at home as well. So you have to be cognizant of that while doing the job.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I remember that I heard the news, obviously, Sean was last year, heart sunk when I heard on the radio.
It
was horrible.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the thing about it is, everybody says I'm so young, and that's what I say, like, that's the nature of soldiers. Soldiers are young. Yeah. So God forbid when they get killed, it's going to be kids getting killed. And I mean, thank God we haven't lost that many, but then again, one's too many.
Yeah, I think we're past the 100 mark anyway, obviously, in the total amount that would be the only.
I'd say, maybe not that much, but I know for sure it's the high 40s from the Lebanon alone.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, we've been there since whatever it was, 1979. So, I mean, statistically speaking, it's not a lot, but I mean, for us as
a small army.
Yeah, you know, and at the end of the day, you're there supposedly to help the people of the country, so, you know, it makes it more difficult, I suppose, to swallow. Yeah. But it's like, and that's the one thing, you know, and I'd say that to any, like, soldier, like NCO officer who leaves, like, you know, don't ever underestimate the edge that having done overseas gives you, because you know, there's pressure outside in the private sector. It's not quite the same.
Yeah, something
you know what I mean? You have a bad day overseas, people die. You know, if you have bad days, like, you know, in your private sector, maybe a customer's order is a bit delayed. Like, and I'm not, like, obviously, you know, undervaluing the importance of, you know, meeting customer needs, but as an individual, I think it puts you in a position where you're better placed to be able to deal with stress, and, you know, and because you're definitely not going to be overwhelmed with it. You're probably going to be in a better position to deal with it and move on. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, you definitely handle situations a lot better. A camera, and just like don't be worrying at the ground kind of thing. You know?
And I mean, that's the thing about it, is like the simplest, you know. And I mean, over the years, like, I'm 50 now, so
still only a pup.
Yeah, a good 27 years left in me. But it's kind of, you know, the way to deal, like, if you're in like a high pressure situation, and I mean, it's a matter of just making a list and prioritising it, because you know, you won't do everything. It's impossible. And if you find yourself in a job where you're constantly under pressure, there's something wrong. Yeah. Because you shouldn't be. You know, if you're constantly under pressure, there's not enough resources there in the first place, and that needs to be addressed. But by the nature of whatever, you're gonna have bad days. It's going to be supply chain problems or whatever. Then you're going to have a stressful situation, and how you deal with it then is you list what needs to be done, and you start at the most and work down the way, and delegate, because it's the only way to do it. Because if everybody's running around, nothing's going to get done.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And how many overseas trips did you get then in total?
I had 7 in 6 different places, and then after I left the army, I was a civilian contractor for NATO for 5 years.
Right. Where did you serve overseas in all your missions, can you say?
Right, yeah. I was thinking about this the other way, the car up, so I had to use my fingers. So it was Lebanon, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Bosnia, Congo, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Kosovo twice.
Yeah. What was the most challenging trips?
Physically and suppose personally was the Congo, because the conditions were absolutely brutal.
Yeah,
you know, it was just physically, you know, it's a hard place to be because of the weather and everything. And I suppose for the level of work and I suppose the output being required and the level I was working at, Afghanistan, because I mean, at the stage when I was there was only 7 Irish there, and we were all working with multinationals. So the group I was in was you know, Americans, Australians and British. So you know, and you find out then how good your training is. Like, I mean, you know, obviously we're not at the level where we were fighting as many, you know, real gun battles, but however, you're expected to produce product at the same level as these guys, and we were never found wanting. So I mean, that for me, it was I suppose rewarding in the sense that you know, I
Yeah.
I held my own and did very well. And, you know, working at a level, like, you know, I was in charge of the fragos and stuff, so fragmentary orders, and like 2 of them were called LIM-DIS, which is limited distribution, which required signatory by COM-ISAF, 4-star. Like, he's the Tom Cruise of American officers, in the sense that it was such a serious mission. So I had to be sure that the product I had, I literally was me and him.
Yeah.
And like these guys, you know, there's no, well, you know, it's either right or, you know, and he said it straight out to me, and he said, is this correct? And I said, it is, sir. And he said, it better be. And you're just so, you know, and it was so. And like, I mean, they just sack you over it, no problem. Like, if you're not doing it, gone. There'd be no looking out, you know, I'll give him another chance. So, I mean, that, I suppose, professionally was the most rewarding, and it was my last trip as well.
Okay.
You know?
Yes.
As a last military trip,
Yeah, can't. And then, so how did you left the army then, right? Why did you decide to leave? Was your time just up, like you had the pension in the bag?
No, well, I mean, my time was up, obviously. I got a 22 done at that stage, but it was like, I kind of had reached a point, because from 2006 till 2012, when I left, I'd been overseas for a part of every year, right? And I'd been all over the place. I'd done different jobs. I had, like, to go back a bit, I went take out college and overseas trips. I was 2nd Battalion, McKee Barry's Company, 5th Battalion, 27 Battalion. So I had all the Eastern Brigade battalions all the way up. So, you know, as platoon commander, adjutant, QM, then company commander of A company, the infantry one, support company, and headquarter company. And then my final job then, when I came back from Afghanistan, was the Ordnance Clothing and Equipment Centre in the Curragh.
Okay.
Because
big operation.
Yeah, like massive, but like completely.
Yeah.
You know, it's as close as you would be to like a civilian job as there is, because you're dealing with civilian suppliers. Half the staff are civilian. You know the way, because they originated in Clancy and they moved down there eventually. And basically, you're a big warehouse. Yeah, you know, it's all camouflage stuff, but it's a warehouse, you know, and your customers are the clothing or the ordnance centres and all the brigades. So I'd done everything in that sense, operational, logistic, and right back, and then I just was kind of saying, like, what's next? And I was reaching the point then as well where it was time for me to do the senior commander staff course, which would have been 9 months, and then you're looking at getting promoted, and then you're into the next cycle. So I was kind of saying to myself, do I want to keep doing this? Like, what else is there for me within the army that I kind of would like to do? And I mean, outside being a battalion commander, there was nothing I kind of hadn't done at that point. So and then literally just serendipity, like, I heard about this job in Kosovo, the civilian one, with NATO, and I applied for it, and I got it, and then I just said, right, that's it, go.
Yeah. What was the job in with NATO?
I was basically what they call an ICC, an International Civilian Consultant, which meant that I was given the NATO mission in Kosovo, KFOR, where the Irish were. Actually, I was working with the Irish while I was over there as a civilian, but basically my job was the QA, so quality assurance for the supply chain for all the real life support. So basically the feeding of all of the KFOR troops in KFOR Main, which was the main, and there's a place up in the north called Notting Hill, which was the northernmost. So basically responsible for making sure that they were fed and watered, and dealing with the civilian companies that were contracted by NATO.
So, and would you be based on the Irish camp, or would you be?
It wasn't the Irish camp. It was in the KFOR Main, which was the headquarters. But that was, by the time I got there, actually, my second from last trip as a soldier, I closed the Irish camp in Kosovo.
Yeah, that
was my last job. So when I went back there as a civilian, the only place where the Irish were, I think there was 12 of them, was in KFOR Main, and with the other 28 nations then.
Yeah, I think I was actually meant to go on that trip to Kosovo where they were closing down the camp. But someone broke my leg a few weeks before I was meant to go.
That'll stop you.
So we can get onto the phone.
That was a big job actually. That was probably, you know, take out, I suppose, Afghanistan as a test of your professionalism. Now, to close down a trip is serious.
Yeah, definitely, because some of the lads had to come home on the boat and stuff like that.
And we moved it every way. There was boats, like we had to move stuff by rail from Kosovo down through Macedonia into Thessaloniki and out that way, and stuff was flowing out as well. So you can imagine, like, you know, if you're doing your ordnance check and your gear is in the camp. It's on the back of a truck. It's on a train. It's on a ship and that. And so that was big. And then also, you had to kind of factor in the manpower to decide that, like, as the camp closed down, people had to go back.
Yeah. So
but there also had to be a certain amount of security until it came to a point where there was no, whatever they call it, category A stuff that didn't need to be, like, secured. And then we had to literally, and then the camp was being taken down because it had to be handed back to the Kosovo government in the way as a greenfield site. So then we at one stage we had to move to Camp Victoria, which were the Swedish were.
Yeah.
And then when we got smaller again, we just moved into the headquarters, and then we left.
Oh, okay.
But so that was serious. So then when I went back then after I left the army, there was, I think, 12 in all different jobs. So most of them were in the HSG, which is the headquarter support group. Okay.
So there's enough. And did you find much of a difference going back as a civilian then?
No, I always say I kind of half cheated because, like, I wasn't really a civilian. I was a NATO civilian, and the thing about it was, and I was actually probably I had an advantage over all the other civilians there because I was ex-military, so I had better concept of the rank structure, what it meant, and I suppose all the intricacies, and I wasn't scared by the fact that this guy's a colonel or this guy's I knew exactly where I stood, so it was kind of a soft landing from the army.
There was no major difference, like, dealing with, like, the civilians.
No, not at all. And, like, I was as the QA, the quality assurance, basically you're responsible for developing the scope of work, which is basically is what the NATO contracting officer sends out to all of the international companies, saying, right, this is what we need.
Yeah.
You need to feed X amount of people, X amount of meals in these locations. This is the minimum requirements taken into account, like I suppose dietary, religious, ethnic, all of the differences, of the different nations there. And then based on that, then you'll get tenders. You assess the tenders, and then whoever gets the contract, then your job then is to monitor that they perform according to the contract that they got. So, like, you're dealing with people who pretty much, they want to be.
They want to perform.
Yeah, because they have to.
Are they all sent out to, like, local? No.
No. There's above a certain. I don't know. It's probably changed over a certain. Like, I think the one I was on was, like, probably 3 or 4 million a year, but over a certain amount it can't be local, it has to be international.
Yeah.
So
avoid corruption.
And also because they wouldn't have the scale to do it. So I mean, like, in a lot of the places, like, there was people called KBR and DynCorp, which are American, and they're the ones that they started. They would have. There was a place in Kosovo called Bond Steel, which was the American base. Yeah. KBR did that, and the other one were KBR and DynCorp. And when I was there, DynCorp were just didn't get the contract because the company did get it. Can't even think of their names now, but they came in cheaper.
Okay.
And, like, within all things being equal, the cheaper will get it. But the thing about it is, what you need to be very wary of, and it's the same, subsequently found out as well. Like, the one thing is dangerous when you're dealing with contract management, and particularly in the procurement phase, is people over-promising.
Yeah.
That they're saying, can you do this? And we'll do everything. But then the problem is they can't do it on the day, and then you have a problem because, obviously you can always terminate the contract, but in the meantime, then you're not providing the service to the people you're meant to be. So it's important, and that's what it takes. Like, you need to have, I suppose, enough wherewithal and information of what the industry norm would be to say, hang on, there's no way this guy can do this for this amount. And you'd say, the way, because, like, if you have 4 people, like, bidding, and, like, one of them is like $1 million less than all the others, you say, like, maybe you are that good, but take it from me, you're not going to be. So that's why. And then, of course, once you sign off on it, then it's your responsibility to manage it then. And they're 5-year contracts that every year, then if they're meeting the contract requirements, it automatically signs on to the year, and then every 5 years, then the whole thing goes back out to bid again. So that was it. So I mean, the thing about it was, I knew Kosovo well anyway, because I'd been there for nearly a year with the army on the other 2 trips I was on. And then, the fact that was, you'd got a lot of the senior positions within the HSG, within KFOR headquarters were Irish. Okay. So you had that advantage as well. So, like, I mean, like, the HSG commander was a full colonel who was Irish. The fund manager was a BQ, Irish as well. And you had people then actually within the J8 was the finance crowd, were Irish as well. So you always had that insight, and the Irish Army being so small, I never didn't know somebody, you know, the type of way. So like I was over there for 5 years, so there was 10 rotations, and there wasn't one rotation where I didn't know at least half them.
That's
so that, which is good if you knew them, if you liked them, but if they didn't like it, not so good. That's, you know, that's the way it goes.
But out of the 5 years, right, that you're there for, like, how did it work, like getting home? Like, were you 6 weeks in, 2 weeks out?
Well, you see,
it wasn't 5 years straight, was it?
No. But the thing about it was, like, it wasn't like time in. The problem was you'd only X amount to leave. So you know, and the thing about it was, so I tried to basically every 12 weeks come back for at least, and you know, fly out Friday or something like that, and then you didn't have to take the weekend as leave, so type of stuff like that. So what I mean, you know, why did I finish? It was because of that, because it got too much. Like I was watching with kids growing up on Facebook, and it's just not worth it, because like I heard a very interesting thing now, and like in hindsight, like if by the time your kids are 18, you've spent 95% of the time you're ever going to spend with them.
True.
Right? And if that time is watching them, or, you know, Skyping them, or whatever it was, Zoom at the time, you know, it's just, and I mean, we're lucky as well, they actually came out to me for a few months as well, because after my son was born, my wife, as I said, she's in the army, she was on maternity leave, so she came out for maternity leave, and so that was good. But the thing about it was, you know, Murphy's Lodge, just when they arrived, an ISIS threat went onto the camp, and they locked the place down, and like it was coming to the point where they were going to try to, like, I didn't live on base, I lived off base, but it got to the point where they were contemplating making the civilians move in, and it didn't get that bad, but I mean, it all of a sudden wasn't such a good idea, you know, and of course then, you know, you've got grandparents sitting at home saying, well, you bring your 2 kids over to where the ISIS are, like, you know what I mean, and the Kosovo wasn't a war zone, but I mean, every now and again it got messy, but then, like, at that point, you know, ISIS were a legitimate threat everywhere in the world, so you know, but so that way made it easy. But as I said, the reason at the end was it wasn't like I wasn't going to keep doing that, you know, and so kind of did the fight. And I suppose, you know, on a professional level, the one major benefit to me by being over there was, like, I did a Masters of Science in Operations and Supply Chain Management from the University of Liverpool, which is one of the better known ones. So, and I was able to do that because, you know, what else would you be doing? You know, that, and I did it. So because you know, we were discussing earlier on this idea about people saying, you know, hiring people from the army, that they'd like them to be, you know, have a bit of civilian time before they take them on. And I get that. I mean, they're wrong. Whoever they are, they're wrong. But what I will say is, if you have a piece of paper that says that, like, you know, this guy was, like in my case, I was a logistics officer, right? Great. What does that mean? I said, well, I'll tell you what, I have a Masters of Science in Operations and Supply Chain Management. Now, that's what it means. And then you can say, you know, so basically then you have, you know, a civilian qualification that matches your professional experience. And to me, and down to the level, like, I mean, you know, you can argue how good is it, what does a Master's mean? But in many cases, you won't get the interview without it.
Yeah, it's the key to the door, right? But it's not the foot in the door.
Not at all, no.
I think it's down to experience. I think a big problem with, like, military personnel, right, is just not understanding the civilian world, right, or how to, you know, translate the CV from, like, the military kind of technology into the civilian world, right? And it's just kind of, that's just an area that people need to work on if they're going to make that change.
And I mean, you see it as well, like, go through LinkedIn, like, and you see this guy, like, you know, weapons platoon commander, you know, doesn't mean anything to anybody, you know what I mean? Like, it's cool in the army, but it's, but the thing about it is, and, you know, you're not, you know, officer of command, and, like, you're not the adjutant, you're not the BQ. You know, you're the logistic lead, or you're the, you know, the inventory manager, or you're your HR. Like every, like, you know, in the army has all your J's or whatever, J1, 2, 3, and they all have exact, you know, counterparts in civilian. So if you're staying in the army, fine, call yourself J1. But, you know, if you're thinking of, if you have an eye to the outside, your HR, your ops, you know, your logistics, your whatever. Because and the thing about it is, and, you know, that's why, like delighted to do this for you and stuff. But, you know, if anybody's listening, the one thing I would say to anybody in the army is, one, you know, you're better than you think.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, you're far better than you think. And, you know, I'll go say, like, if you're an officer, non-commissioned or commissioned, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The level of management and leadership that you have, that you do every day, is incredible. And it's very, very, very hard for people like in the private sector to get that type and to have that level of responsibility, because the way the army is, once you're in charge, you're in charge. Yeah. And that's it. And there's no, you're right, you're a BQ, you do the logs course, you're the BQ. There's nobody there going like, we'll give you a few months to lead into it. That's it. If you're good enough to pass the course, if you're good enough to get commissioned, if you're good enough to be to pass your potential NTO, you're now an NTO, you're a leader. Go out and lead those people. Yeah. And, you're dealing with traditionally harder, tougher people who are setting away in what's more than likely going to be more stressful and possibly dangerous, extreme environments. So again, people have to realise, they are better than they think, and they should, I suppose, not be afraid to look outside.
Well, yeah, you can't be afraid, right?
No.
But that's the thing, right? So like a team lead, right, outside, like in a warehouse, will only be managing like 4 people, right? What's an NCO, like, go out on a corporal's course, 8 people, like, and probably learn how to lead a team of 30, right, when you're in charge and your days off between early. So yeah, a lot of leadership skills there, even from recruits, like they probably get more leadership training.
Yeah, because I mean, like, no matter rank, whatever rank you are, you have to be in a position that if your boss goes down, you might have to take over.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, private might have to take over as a section 2 IC. So all of it, and again, corporal has to be platoon sergeant, ready to be platoon sergeant. So that's 30 people. Like, and I mean, people, over the years have been interviewed or whatever, speaking to people, like, and they've said, what's the most people you ever been in charge of? Yeah. Sure, I mean, like, I was an acting battalion commander. So it's like, it's at 500.
Yeah.
And like, obviously, and you're never going to be in charge. You're able to be in charge. Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're directly responsible if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And there's nobody in the private sector, in charge of 300 or 400 people either, because they all have leads and senior leaders or whatever they're called, depending on what industry you're in. But and that's again another, I think, major advantage if you can embrace delegation. That you can't, like, if you're doing it all yourself, you're not doing it right.
Yeah,
it's that simple. Like, and you have to be able to, and to be able to delegate properly, you have to, one, have hired the right people, or in the case of the army, have trained them properly, and then you have to be, and if you hand the reins over, let it go. Now, you can't say you do it now and then start following it. It's just not going to work. So that's why, again, the army did, unknown to yourself, they're developing all these skills that, like, would take probably twice as long to get in the private sector, because you just won't get the progression as quickly.
Yeah. And once you left, obviously, the going into NATO was probably a good transition from military to civilian, let's say, because you were a civilian. How did you find then coming back to Ireland and getting your first job then in Ireland? Was that a harder transition?
Yeah, well, it was hard because I kind of had picked the date that I'm going to get out of here, just coincided with being there 5 years. So first job I came back to was it was an operations manager role with a construction company, but I wasn't operations in the sense they used to do the facades for high rise buildings, but I wasn't, because obviously I'm not an engineer, but I was kind of, it was works manager, so I was in charge of the plans room, so where the guys who converted the what would you call them? I suppose the architect's drawings into technical drawings. So the architect goes, "Oh, this is what the building looks. It's going to look lovely," and then they have to convert it into these are the Lego blocks that will make it look like that. Okay. So again, what was my background in? Nothing. But I mean, the idea is, and I think I said this to you when I met you years ago. Like, any good operations manager, supply chain manager should be able to deploy their trade in any industry, because it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, you're moving widgets. You have to move widget A from location X, get it into the operation centre, get it put together properly, the right QA levels, and get it out to the customer. Is that like, is it building facade? Is it food? Is it bullets? Is it like diamonds? It doesn't matter. Yeah. It is a product that needs to be put together and got out to the customer. So, the first job I got was a year, a 12-month contract. Yeah. So, I picked one kind of job, and it was just basically version control of because what was happening was, version 1, right, we need like a right angle, and next time someone go, oh no, just change that. And what would happen was the wrong drawing would go in, and then it'd go out on site, and you know, there might be a problem, whatever. So we just developed a kind of a version control system that you were 100% knew that the what you call it, the plan you were working on was the latest one.
Okay.
So that was it. So I mean, I was only there a year, and but it was good because that was me. It was back in Ireland.
Yeah.
In 100% in the private sector, and like you know, the construction industry is savagely pressurized.
Yeah, I'd say so. Deadlines and so
on. Oh yeah, and again, it's back to that thing. Like I mean, they are winning contracts based on saying I'll have it done by X date.
Yeah, so you know,
and there's so many moving parts that everything can go wrong. You know, you could like hit it out of the park and have every single piece of that building ready to go, and then the trucking company don't show up and lift it. It doesn't matter then. It doesn't matter saying like I have all the parts that are in the factory. They're not on the building. They're not on the building. So there's that. So I mean, that was a good introduction, and then it was 12 months, so it was ending anyway. Yeah. And then I actually started lecturing in Carlow.
Okay.
Yeah, I had on the masters, the supply chain masters, and operations degree as well. And in my head, I always thought when I left the army I was going to be a lecturer. That was me, and I was going to go off into the sunset with the cardigan and the leather. Nah, I just didn't like it at all. Like,
yeah, was it just not what you thought?
No, it wasn't what I thought. I just didn't get any buzz out of it at all, and I just got, you know. And the thing about it was, well, I'm probably unlucky for the student I had was because, like, Liverpool was savagely difficult. Like, I mean, it was without doubt the hardest. Like, I'd be bright, but like, it was academically speaking. So I went out and said, right, this is the level I expect. Yeah. And I kind of, you know, maybe that might be a bit heavy. So I said, all right, fine, okay. But it was just, it wasn't the same, you know, and I mean, you know, and it's not fair for me, you know, to ever, not just in college, but in work, whatever, to expect people to operate at the same level or the same motivations as yourself, but it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And then literally I was saying, no, this isn't for me. And then I got a call from a recruitment agency about the Blue Nile job.
Okay. And that's when you went in.
Yeah, and then I did that for 5 years then as well, yeah.
Did you find, so feedback I got from my staff, right, was that you need to employ another soldier. You need another person like you because you're just at a different level to what because my standard obviously is a bit higher, right, from what I'm expecting delivering for our customers. Yeah. Did you find that from being in the army, you just had a higher level of expectation from what people should deliver? Of
everything, and everything, like, and I mean, it's not a cliche or it's not being naive, right? But like the one thing that is not the same in the outside is there's not the same esprit de corps. You know, there isn't that idea of, there's teams, like, and I get now why you'll see, you know, team building is so strong, you know, in the private sector now. And, you know, years ago, cynical, I would have been a poo-pooing it, but like, it actually does work because to get the best out of any group, they have to want to help each other. You know, they have to want to be a team.
Yeah.
The army just instills that in you. You know, it's this idea of, it's not a job anyway, the army. You know, it's a vocation or it's a love or whatever. You mightn't end up like that, but that's why you join in the first place. So the one thing I would just, you know, people, if you, and I mean, it's also, I suppose, a limitation as a manager or a leader as well, is to expect everybody to be the same as you, and then to, you know, and to be unhappy if they're not, because everybody has different motivations, different background, like, you know, and you know, some people, all it is, they're just there, you know, to earn their few pay, and that's fine. And but the thing about it is as well, you know, and that's fine, but you know, by signing up for that then as well, you know, you then have an obligation to provide whatever the company needs for you to get to pay your bills or whatever, you know. And you don't have to be, you know, you're not like the army expecting everybody being there, you know, if you're 5 minutes early, you're late. No, there's, like, I mean, that's probably gone too far. Yeah. But at the same time, it's just, you know, and I think as well, you know, the one thing I was probably shocked at was, again, I'm only generally speaking, there's obviously people out there who buy and sell people in the army as well. I've met people in the private sector said if they were in the army, they would be unbelievable. But generally speaking, resilience levels wouldn't be as high in the sense that, you know, if things go wrong, it's a real, you know, whereas, you know, in the army, because you have to do it anyway, so you're going to keep going. But people are supposed to be more inclined to maybe throw their cap at it if things don't go well. But, you know, there's times as well where I would have seen, you know, there was roles that came up, you know, in places where I was, and I was saying, you know, that maybe if I brought in X or Y from the army, and then I kind of went, I don't know whether the rest of them could deal with them though, you know, the type of way, because it'd be just, you know, can you imagine, like, you know, like that, the thing we were discussing earlier, like, I mean, some of the CQs and BQs, the stores guys that you met over your career, imagine bringing them, like, and putting them in, and like if some guy comes in looking for, you know, his part for whatever his job he's doing, and then he gets hopped off by this like absolute beast, and you're just like, whoa, I only want, and you like with these ideas like they're my stores, you know, and you're just there, they're not your stores, but and that's, and I suppose that's the fine line you're treading. So and I think it's and it is important to realise that when you left the army, you've left the army. Yeah. And only bring the positives with you. And there's a lot of stuff that the army, you know, isn't helpful in the real world either, you know. This you can, like, you know, suck it up, you know, that doesn't work either, you know, because, you know, we're not fighting a war.
Yeah, in the army, like, when you ask someone to do something, you're telling them.
Yeah.
Whereas it's kind of like, when you want someone to do something in the civilian world, it's like, oh, what do you think about this? Oh, can you get that done for me?
Yeah, I get that as well. And I mean, people have, that was always a kind of thing, like, it used to be this, you know, trick question, I suppose. You used to get asked, you know, the way, so you're not in the army anymore, because in the army they have to do what you tell, but they don't have to, really.
Yeah, because
you know what I mean. Sometimes
I'd be like, yeah, I'll get that done for you.
Or like, I mean, and at the end of the day, like, not to the level of an unlawful order, but I mean, you can't just, like, you know, and at the end of the day, if, you know, you told a guy to do something in the army, if for whatever reason he didn't want to really do it, he won't do it. Yeah. I mean, there'd be consequences, but he won't do it. Yeah. So you can't assume that it's going to be done. And also, if you know, extrapolate that out to the civilian world, like, at the end of the day, you know, if you, like, it doesn't matter what verb, ask somebody to do something. Yeah. I mean, if they don't do it, and it's their job, and there's going to be consequences for them as well. It's not, like, I mean, it won't be the, like, you know,
it's not the
Lig a mock, but it will be HR, and in ways probably more, you know, like, I suppose, severe. And this idea of, you know, you have to, and I mean, and it is a way, like, I mean,
it's a lot more formalised in the civilian world, the disciplinary process.
But it's more severe as well at the same time, you know.
And I suppose in the army, right, if you're like a corporal or sergeant or a young officer or whatever, you have more discretion to deal with matters on the spot. Exactly. Whether it's a couple of push-ups or, you know, you're staying a bit later after work, like, you just deal with it rather than putting them in front of the officer on charges. Whereas in the civilian world, you're basically up on charges straight away.
Yeah, and that and the cost of your job. And the thing about it is as well, like, you know, and that's why HR exists. You know, there are, you know, there's, like, you know, when you're the manager, like, and you're dealing with, say, you know, or an underperforming, like, employee or whatever, like, you have a certain amount of flexibility, you know, when you're dealing with that, like, you know, you identify, is there a problem, you know, and you address it. But it comes a point where no matter who you are, from CEO down to like a warehouse lead, that you have to hand it over to HR. Yeah. And once you do, that's it. You know, what happens at that point. So yeah, it's you know, I think, as I said, I probably did it the right way, you know, unknown to myself. It's kind of soft landing, like half army, half civilian. Yeah. And then into the real world, and then probably even into construction, even more, like, you know, from one extreme to the other. Like,
probably similar kind of personalities.
Yeah, right? Yeah, tough people, like, you know, guys who started on the sites and got all the way up to MDs, and then guys who, like, went from literally putting up the steel bits to designing them and stuff, and like, unbelievable, like, experience that you'll never ever get yourself. And again, and that's it. So I suppose you have to be humble enough and put your ego in your back pocket and say, listen, you know more than me, but at the end of the day, this thing has to be on that wall by next Friday. Yeah, so, make it happen. Yeah, like, what do we need? And if it can't happen, you tell me, you know, can your bit happen? Yeah. And then, well, of course I'll have it done. Well, then why won't it happen? Well, because this fella. And then you deal with that. Or the truck won't be on time. And you say, well, listen, I guarantee you the truck will be here that morning. Will you have your bit? And then all of a sudden then, all right, yeah, well, yeah. And then you say, you don't worry about the other fellas not doing their job. You just do your job. It's my job as the manager, leader, whatever I am, you're going to call me, to make sure everybody get. And that's the difference, because, you know, everybody likes to say, oh yeah, but perfect, it's the other fella. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, it's not the other fella. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you work, or did you, because you obviously would have been a senior enough level, right, when you moved out, did you employ any, like, ex-army people into any of the jobs that you worked in?
There was only that one, that job I thought about in Blue Nile, but he actually was too senior. Yeah. I mean, the money would have been all right, but the level of responsibility, he would have cracked up. And like, I I didn't even know he was in. I came in. The CVs came in.
Yeah.
You know, and I just rang him and I said, listen, this is what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, he's kind of.
And he went, all right. So, and he said, keep me in mind. But other than that, no, because like even though, you know, when you think about it, like I've come on 26, 27 years.
Yeah.
I've only had 4 jobs.
Yeah.
Army, CV, NATO, construction. Yeah, 4. Well, sorry, 5 counting the college.
Yeah.
But so and particularly funnily enough though, when I was in Blue Nile, my boss in America was ex-military.
Ex-military, yeah. Okay, yes.
And obviously American, but I mean, even still, it
The
makes a
mindset's
difference.
the same,
Yeah,
like.
100%.
Yeah.
You know, and in fact, the Americans go out of their way to kind of, I suppose, hire ex-service people. So there was a lot of them, because I was over there 2 or 3 times over the years, and you know, it was, and like every, what is it, Veterans Day or whatever, they used to send out stuff and, you know, and do little pen pieces and stuff, and you know, it's good to see, like, you know. But so and I mean, and I think in the last 5 years in Blue Nile is when, I suppose, how the exposure then was to, you know, international, in the sense that, you know, like, you know, the construction was Irish.
Yeah.
And then now this was international, and you know, the customer base was all of Europe. My headquarters was Seattle. And then you were dealing with, and you know, the supply chain was literally global. So yeah. You know, and I was reached that point then. But the thing about it was, you know, my job was FC, it's a fulfillment center.
Yeah. Which
is basically, you know, I suppose it was a production center, but for jewelers. Yeah, so you had obviously a high security inventory area because of diamonds, your jewelers, packaging, and distribution, all within the one area. And then, so as the manager of that, you know, you weren't production, you weren't supply chain, you were general manager in the true sense, because everything was different. You know, there was the security, as you can imagine, was serious. You know, and also, I suppose when you're dealing with people who are spending like millions on stuff, the levels of customer service, it's a different level. You know, it's not, you're not just throwing stuff into a bag and taking it out the door.
Yeah, it's high value product, right?
Seriously high value. Yeah.
So
and I mean, to the level where, you know, there was 2 or 3 times I actually flew to locations with and hand delivered stuff to people. You know, because it was just, you know, obviously there's companies that provide that service, but there's a fairly long lead time on it. Yeah. So basically, you know, if the I suppose the product was expensive enough and the customer was VVIP, you know, I sat down with like, I was security for Europe, so the security with the guys in America, and say, listen, rather than lose this sale, I'll do it.
Yeah.
You know, and then through different ways you can get around the world without drawing attention to yourself, but literally to that level of, you know, putting a box in somebody's hand in a hotel in Prague, you know, real James Bond stuff and stuff. You know, but the thing about it is, that's what's required, and I again would probably bring that back to the fact that, you know, from my army experience, that, you know, there's nowhere, like, if you had to check my roles and responsibilities when I went for that job, it didn't say, there was none of that on it, but it was real. Well, what's and the thing about it is, like, you know, 3 options: don't do it, lose the sale. Second one, send somebody else, or do it yourself. And, you know, there comes about, and I mean, I've said earlier, you can't do everything yourself, but there comes a point where, you know, sometimes you have to. And I think that's another advantage the army people have is, you know, you know, your ability to, you won't ask someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself.
Yeah, true.
You know, whether you're able to or not, you know, you'd give it a lash or you'd help them out, you know, so, and that's it.
Yeah. The thing with the whole security thing is, like, the paranoia, let's say, or the security mindset is built in, right? So if there's a threat, you kind of probably recognise it and
of course
make counteractive steps.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, you just think differently, and that's why, because, you know, when I started, I was getting the brief from the security people in Seattle or whatever, you know, and, you know, of course I was being typical, you know, cute Irish fella, and we were talking about security, and, you know, and obviously they thought they were dealing with an Irish guy, and, you know, I kind of, towards the end of the conversation, they said something about, like, secure, you know, locations or skiffs or whatever, you know, this. Yeah. And I said, like, similar to, like, Afghanistan, and your man goes, were you in Afghanistan? I said, oh yeah, did you? And then, then, you know, but the thing about it is, but you think differently, like, you know, small stuff, you know, disinformation, like, you know, you don't put up, like, on Facebook, I'm off to Prague.
Yeah.
With a picture of the thing. Like, I mean, because some of the stuff I carry was in the millions.
Yeah, it'd be local.
And like the thing about it is, like, and it's such a physically small thing.
Yeah.
You're
crazy,
you're going around saying, like, there's 3 houses, and you're there saying, I mean, obviously, like, God forbid anything happens, you just hand it over because it's insured, you're not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you'd rather not anything like that happen. So and so I mean, and that was again, and I think there were little things like that I enjoyed in the job because
breaks things up, right?
Exactly, because there was like a kind of, it was the company is brilliant, and but when you come in, then one thing, of course, like, I don't believe in making change for change's sake, but no matter where you go, if you come into an organisation, so there's going to be a time where, just because we've always done it that way, doesn't need to continue like that. So so I love that time. I love the time there, and then that's it. As I said, then I've been daddy daycare since the end of April, which is great because
spend the summer with the kids.
Yeah, and literally every day with them, and there's, like, of course, there's GAA camps, soccer camps, and my daughter Ava is starting secondary school actually on Wednesday.
Oh, brilliant!
So that's why I was saying, like, this is my week now to get back into it, because she starts secondary school on Wednesday. And anyway, my wife's back in work in the Curragh next week, so we're back to normality now.
Full military household.
Yeah, well, at one stage we were, yeah.
How was that? Was it difficult enough, I'd say, right?
It was bad because at one stage, when Ava was 3 months old, I basically did a month in ISAF while Roisin was in Kosovo. Okay. So the granny had her.
Yeah,
we were both gone, and then literally, and it was mad because I had gone. I was obviously out ISAF for 7 months. So no, she must have been a year. Anyway, long story short was I hadn't seen her. I had very little to do with her for 7 months. Got off the plane and literally Mammy was already gone. And like Granny and Grandad were there to meet me in the airport and said, there she is. And I was there,
delighted to get away.
I was going to say,
happy to see you and delighted to get away at the same time.
I say I might go back to Afghanistan for a break, but so it was difficult, but I think it's a great opportunity. Like, in as I said to you, I've no regrets about the time in the army, but it was time for me personally to move on, so I did.
Would you recommend that as a career now, or how do you feel about it?
As it stands at the moment, no.
Yeah, no. Not even for a short period. And
well, 100%. Not as a career, but as like you're 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid, you don't know what to do with yourself.
Yeah.
Get in, do 5 years, get a trip overseas, maybe get an opportunity to do an apprenticeship or something. Ideal then. And then meet a group of people that you'll be friends with, like, get experience and other people will, and like a cliche, but it'll harden you up and mature you pretty fast. But I wouldn't hand on heart recommend it as a full-time career now as it stands.
Yeah. Would you let your own kids join?
Yeah. I wouldn't push them, but I wouldn't stop them.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
Yeah. And what about like guys that are looking to leave, or girls? What kind of advice would you give them before they left?
I'd say don't be afraid. First of all, you are better than you think you are, and the one I was thinking about as well, like and I always discuss it. Like I'd ask you, would you recommend going on a career break and trying it?
Yeah, so I said it the last time was that, like, I left after 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, I think I met you the first year I left.
Yeah.
At the interview, but am I sorry that I didn't take a career break? Maybe yes, but then I probably wouldn't have a business now as well, right? So I think the career break's a good option. I was also talking to Jason, who's the CEO of Skillnet. He's an ex-Commandant as well.
Yeah.
And he said like soldiers or like NCOs, senior NCOs and kind of officers should get to spend some time in industry to bring the skills that are in industry back into the military. So the career break seems to be a good option from the people that we've interviewed. I had on the podcast, but I didn't take one. I just decided.
Now, and like I would say, and this is experience, I would say if you can, absolutely do.
Yeah.
But also, if it's not an option and it's a really good opportunity, I would go anyway. And with me, if I'm honest with you, I would say if I had been on a career break, I probably wouldn't have stayed. I probably would have come back.
Okay.
Because the thing about it is, if you're gone, you're gone. You have to
Yeah.
make it work. You know the way, if you have a bad, like, I mean, because, like, you know, within a month or two, like, small stuff when I was in Kosovo, like, the whole, like, you know, I think, like literally the week when I flew in, my tooth exploded on the way over, like, and the, like, bags got lost. The place, the accommodation I got was an absolute horrible place. Like, and I was kind of there on week one, you know, the way, like, boom, like, it's like, if I was on, I would have not gone back. But, like, I was gone. I had to go. Like, I mean, obviously I could have got something else, but I mean, I was there, so I had to stick it out. So I mean, I can see both sides. I think if it's as easy for you to get a career break as not, absolutely get one.
Yeah.
And go then. But also, bear in mind then that, you know, if you're in the new role and you're having a bad, you know, before you say, oh, this isn't for me, try to put yourself into the mindset that if I couldn't go back to the army, how bad would this situation be?
Yeah.
Because you know, nothing, like, everything new is going to be difficult, and I kind of say, you know, if you're there saying, oh, it wasn't for me, I just went back to the army. But, like, if you were honest with yourself, if there was no option, you would have stuck it out.
You would have stayed,
yeah.
Yeah, so now, right, so I left, obviously, and then went back after like 3 weeks, and then left again then I think a year later.
Oh, you got back in, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, because I had leave, right? So before my leave was over, I went back.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of stick over, right?
Yeah.
But sure, look, that's the way it is. But there's a lot of lads that do it and go and, you know, chance the new job and then run back after the leave.
But
so
a lot of
I think you have to take the year if you're going to try.
Not a PDL. Isn't a PDL or
pre-retirement leave,
yeah. Like, I mean, you get a lot of that as well. Like, I mean, by all means, if you can, or if you get a career break, go for it. But what I would say is, if it's not available to you and it's the right option, I'd still give it a lash.
I'll take it.
Because, you know, particularly if you're in long enough that you have some type of a pension, whatever, you know, I mean, you're you know, it doesn't take a lot to get you back onto what you were on in the army, you know, the way, I mean, obviously you want to be in a better position. But, I would say, you know, to me, like, you're in this world, there seems to be an awful lot of jobs out there.
There's a lot of jobs out there, yeah.
They're very specialised, obviously, and, like, you know, they're ones that obviously you'd be ruled out of. But generally speaking, of course, it depends on what your motivations are as well.
Yeah, it depends. Like, so a lot of soldiers seem to go down the consultancy route, right, and it seems to do quite okay. But I'd say, like, look, maybe everyone wants the bigger job and the well-paid job. I think if you're, like, unsure, or maybe, you know, you want to transition smoothly, I'd say maybe look at, like, the current salary that you're on, take that, go outside, and then in 6 months or 12 months negotiate up, because that's possible, right? In the army you can't negotiate your salary, but in the civilian world you can, and if you're adding value, then that's fine. But you also have to understand, I said it before, it's like, in the army you're paid for what you're prepared to do, but outside you're paid to be effective, right, and make sure that company is making profit. So you have to understand, obviously, like, that you have to be providing 3 or 4 times value for what you're being paid, so that the company can continue in business. So people have to understand that as well.
You're not just hogging off on the day, but you're right. And I suppose another bit of advice I would give anybody is, don't leave because you got the hump. Because something happened. Yeah. Or, you know, like, you didn't get a course, or you didn't get a trip, or, you know, something didn't go your way, because, like, you know, you're not going to show them.
Yeah.
You know, I'll show them, you won't. You know what I mean? The army will trundle on and you'll be gone. Like, and the thing about it is, if you jump for the wrong reason, you know, you're starting on the wrong foot immediately.
Yeah. The other thing is, I had a lot of family pressure actually when I left the first time. They're like, what are you doing? Like, you'd be 28 with a pension. Like, you can have to, well, if you're younger, you have to ignore that as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I mean, the thing about it is as well, you know, it doesn't, you know, I think it's an Irish thing, this whole idea of the safe pensionable job, but, like, and why would you give it up? But I mean, like, you only one life as well.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? And I'd rather, you know, go out there and give it a lash, because, you know, I there was part of me saying, you know, as I said, like, I was down in the Curragh, you know, in charge of the clothing stores. Yeah. And I said, like, you know, do I want to be that grumpy old fucking Lieutenant Colonel everybody gives out about in 10 or 15 years, like, you know, and it'd be my own fault because I didn't, you know, I didn't just go, and I'm delighted I did now. But again, I 100% was calm about it, and, you know, that role in Kosovo was serious in every sense of the word. So, you know, But it was also a big enough, it was a gamble because one, I'd left the army, right, and two, I was leaving my family, going to another country,
5 years.
you know, the way, and working for, you know, a different boss whenever they change over there, and you know, I didn't know what it was going to be like, you know, and that's it. So, but you know, in hindsight, it was the right thing to do, but it could have very easily went wrong. So I was kind of saying, you know, that's what I said, because I was talking to a few people. I've actually, a lot of my cadet class have left the army now, and those that are in it now are all minimum lieutenant colonels. Some of them are full colonels, so they're lifers now. Like they're not, but they're actually coming to the point now where they'll have to retire anyway on age grounds, you know, because I would have been one of the younger in my class. But like I think a lieutenant colonel can go at 54 or 56 now, I think, you know. So there's lads who literally are going to go on a full pension anyway. They've no choice.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously they're going to stay, and any of the guys who are colonels are there till 60 if they want. So yeah, and I mean, you know, and I see like my wife is in, but she's different in the fact, like she's specialist, she's a counsellor, you know the way, and so but she's very kind of, I suppose, specialised. But having said that, she's either just doing the senior commander staff course, which is it's not specialised, it's just all the army and navy actually and Air Corps do it. Right. So you go back into the real army for that period of time for promotion. But you know, it's different for everybody. But I suppose the underlying thing is, don't be afraid, and you know, you think about it. Whatever you've done in any job in the army, there is a private sector equivalent, and your equivalent in the private sector is doing less than you're doing every day in no matter how they dress up, a less stressful environment. And you need to, and the problem about it is, you just, in the army, you become institutionalized. You don't realize how much you do by just your job, you know.
Yeah, even though you're a cog on a machine, you're still
everybody's a cog on the machine. That's the thing about it is, you know, you're cog in the private sector machine as well, and probably, you know, and that would be, you know, probably one of the hardest things to do. Like how it's easier to motivate somebody in the army because, you know, you're all part of the team. We're all in the. How do you do it then if you're a manager in Aldi or Lidl or whatever, you know? And it can be done, and you know, and motivation is very important. But like, I kind of my personal mantra is like discipline trumps motivation every time. You know what I mean? You can't be motivated all the time, but you can be disciplined because you're in control of discipline. I mean, 2 years ago in the middle of COVID, I decided, I tell you what I'm going to run a marathon, right?
Right.
So I just went on my own, like literally, I ran it for Pieta House.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
And got a lot of money as well because like I put it up, you know, the way to the guys in America, so they were really pro that, you know, mental health or whatever. But the reason I bring it up was like, anybody, if you ask anybody about running a marathon, hardest thing about running a marathon is the training. Yeah. The day itself is nothing, but like, there was times like getting up at like, I don't know, 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning to run 25k. I wasn't motivated. I'd have done anything. I just had to do it because I had, like, maybe back to the army thing, done out a training plan. That day had to be done, and discipline will trump motivation every time. And the thing about it is, you know, if you need to, you know, if motivation doesn't work for you or for the people that you're in charge of, then get discipline in. And I don't mean discipline, you just say like, okay, you mightn't love being here, but this is the reason you're here, and this is what you need to do. Just get that done. And, you know, if you can, like, I mean, you know, you can go to the far end, you start kind of like big picture, and like, for instance, like, you know, how do you motivate somebody who's, I don't know, sitting on the till in Aldi, you know, and have to swipe X amount of stuff through in a certain time, you know. But I mean, if you want to be holistic and maybe a bit kind of airy-fairy about it, but the bottom line is that model works so that Aldi can provide food at such a low level. So by you doing that, you are contributing to the fact that, like, please God, people can afford to have their dinner, and, you know, they pay relatively as well. So I mean, either one, this is what you need to do to meet your KPIs, or your, like, be disciplined enough to do that. If you can get some type of enjoyment out of it, be motivated, all the better. But if not, that's it. Yeah, you know.
A big thing I find, like, with the discipline, right, is making out my day plan for next week. So on Friday before I left the office on Friday, I wrote down every day of the weekend, put in times of certain things, certain times, certain things have to happen. And even if I'm like feeling like shit, I don't want to do it, I know Monday, this is what has to be done. This is the clients that have to get CVs. These are the people that have to be interviewed, and it's just done and dusted.
And that's how to do it, because like if you're, as you said, if you're,
you won't
like,
be motivated every day of the week.
No. If you are, there's something wrong with you. You know, you just like, but if
Life's a slog.
Yeah, just go. Just say, I have to do X today, do it. And if you do extra, great. If not, if you've done the bare like minimum for that day, that's all you needed to do.
Yeah. That's it.